Good morning, family, and welcome to today's Lessons for Life. Today is Tuesday, October the 21st, 2008, and today we're reading Genesis chapter 22, and there was really so much in this chapter, so like always, I tell you to read the chapter for yourself, and whatever comments you might want to add, you can click on and go to the blog, and we'll add it to the blog. So, Genesis 22, we start off with Abraham and Isaac, his son, the son that the Lord had promised him from a couple of years, and Abraham had laughed at because he thought he was too old, and Sarah had laughed at and she thought she was too old, and anyone that basically heard about it would have laughed at it because it would seem impossible to in man's eyes, but God made it possible. It wasn't too hard for him, as we learned in the other chapters as well too. So now Abraham and Isaac are there, and the Lord now speaks to Abraham and says that he wants him to sacrifice his son Isaac as a burnt offering. Now the Lord is telling him to take his son that he's been waiting for and sacrifice him. Now Abraham is obedient, and he starts leading his son up to the sacrifice. And one of the first things I noticed in this chapter is that Abraham did not tell anyone. He told nobody else about his plan of what he's going to do. So no one else could persuade him that he should do something else. No one can tell him that he was crazy. No one can really try and distract him from his focus. And that's one lesson that we can definitely get from this chapter, is a lot of times when we know there's something that we're supposed to do, that the Lord has for us to do, it might not be for anyone else, but it's for us to do, and you don't want to tell anybody else because they might try and persuade you to do something else or distract you from your purpose or from what you know you should be doing. So that's one lesson we could definitely learn from it. And quickly as we go through, he leads Isaac up, and Isaac questions him because he knows that they have all the tools for the sacrifice, but Isaac doesn't see any sacrifice. And Abraham says, "Don't worry, the Lord will provide." And then Abraham bounds his son up. He bounds Isaac up and he lays him down. And he's ready to ready to start to sacrifice him. And another thing that we could stop right there and learn from even Isaac, how he trusted in his father to know that he was doing the right thing. Because at that point, Isaac was, he was a young boy and Abraham was an older man. Isaac could have ran away from him. But he trusted in his father, and he knew the heart of his father and that his heart was going to do right by him, and no matter what. So he allowed himself even to stay there and to be bound up by his father and to become that sacrifice, which is another lesson that we can learn of something that we can see from there, the amount of trust that the son has in the father to know that he's going to do the right thing by him. And it's just a tremendous amount of faith and obedience that Abraham is showing here by sacrificing his son and by listening to what the Lord is saying to do. And even to the lesson of how that communication between Abraham and God must have been a strong communication, because even Abraham could have doubted himself and said, well, did God really say this? Am I crazy, or did I just hear things? But he knew what the Lord had spoken to him, so he had a strong communication with God to know that what he heard was the Lord speaking to him. So now as he's about to sacrifice Isaac, then the angel speaks to him and tells him, don't harm the boy, don't harm the lad, as it says. And just from Abraham's obedience is really what I got out of this chapter and lesson that I think we can all learn from this. And just by his obedience to what the Lord wants him to do, then that's where he actually was open to that blessing that the Lord had promised him from before, where he was going to multiply his seed, and he couldn't even count his seed from the stars in the heavens and the sand upon the seashore. And that was really from the obedience that he had with Isaac. Now, the great lesson I believe that we all can learn from this is that Abraham could have thought that Isaac was the blessing, but he actually was obedient even with that blessing, and that opened him up to an even greater blessing that the Lord had promised him from before. And a lot of times in our own lives, we get something and we think that that is the blessing. We think that that's it. But it's really just something that is able to test us to see if we're actually capable of handling the greater blessing. And let me put it into another better perspective. We might get a job, and we think that that's a blessing, but then that becomes a test where we see, is that going to distract us from serving God like how we used to before? Is that going to distract us from praying, from reading the Bible, from going to church? And that what we see as a blessing is actually, if we can see with our correct eyes, or that little blessing is actually just a test to show us, or to actually see if we're ready to get to that next level of blessing. Just like how Abraham could have thought that Isaac was a blessing, but Isaac wasn't a blessing. Isaac became the test to prepare him, or even to see if he was really ready, or if he was going to put Isaac before the Lord. And so Isaac became the test to see if he can handle the greater blessing, if he was going to be faithful over that little blessing and turn into a larger blessing. And that just reminds me of a series that Bishop had taught on before, and it was called Lessons, Blessings, and Testings. And honestly, I don't remember that the scriptural references that he used for that, and I'm not sure. This might have been one of the scriptural references, but when I read this this morning, it kind of just brought it really into light, and I really understood even more what he was talking about, what Bishop was talking about with those teachings. Because I thought even when he was teaching it, that it really was a little backwards, and maybe it should be lessons first, then testings, and then blessings. You know, you get your lesson first, and you get tested on the lesson that you learn, and then you get blessed by it. But no, as we see in this chapter, you get the lesson. Abraham and Sarah got the lesson. You know, they trusted in the Lord. You know, they laughed at him first. They laughed first. They thought they were too old. But they got the lesson that the Lord, nothing is too hard for the Lord. That was the lesson. Then they got the blessing, which was the birth of their son Isaac. And then they got tested with that blessing. And by him being obedient and faithful over that test, then it opened him up to even the greater blessing, or the manifestation of the full promise that the Lord had promised him before. So in our own lives, you know, we may see certain things as a blessing, and I'm going to take this personally for myself, but that's not the blessing. The blessing that's just something that may seem big for us, but it's really something that's small, and it's going to test us to see if we can really handle the greater blessing. And it tests us by seeing if we're going to still do the same things we were doing before. We're still going to read the Bible. We're still going to get up and pray, and we're still going to go to church, and we're going to still, you know, be spiritually conscious and just conscious of the things that we're supposed to do, and focus on God and not let anything come before us or interfere with our relationship with the Lord. So those things, I would say many blessings will become tests to then open us up, if we pass the test, to the greater blessing. So whatever you see in your life and you think that is your blessing, just see that now as, hey, that's just a test. You still keep your relationship with the Lord, and then it's going to open you up to an even greater blessing. And that's really, like I said, I got that for myself, and that was a tremendous blessing for me, and it really just opened up my eyes and turned on the light for me of what I'd even learned several years ago with the lessons, blessings, and testings. And it was just a tremendous chapter. Like I said, as always, I encourage you to read it, see what you get from this chapter, and share on the blog. And we will talk again tomorrow. Create yourself a wonderfully blessed day today. All right? Create yourself a wonderfully blessed day today, and keep this lesson in mind that, you know, whatever you have that you think is a blessing, don't let anything interfere with your relationship with the Lord. All right?